Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. We've been getting a lot of questions about GLP-1 meds and addiction,
Yeah, seems like everyone's buzzing about these new medications.
especially for those struggling with addiction. So today, we're going to break it all down. We're diving deep into a recent report by, Keaton, McCunn, and Tingy.
Great report. They really dug into how GLP-1s could play a role in treating addiction. And those are meds usually used for diabetes and obesity, right?
Right, like Ozempic and Wegovy, those are the big names. But how do those fit in with addiction? It's a bit of head scratcher, huh?
It is. But think about it. GLP-1s were first designed to help with metabolic stuff.
Right, blood sugar, weight loss, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But get this. Scientists found that GLP-1 receptors, those things the meds attach to, they're also in the brain.
No way. So
Yeah.
in the brain, not just in the body.
Yep. And in areas linked to reward and pleasure, too.
Now that's really interesting. So is that connection what made researchers think, hey, maybe these could help with addiction too?
You got it. See, addiction messes with those same reward pathways. Drugs like opioids or alcohol, they flood the brain with dopamine, that feel-good chemical.
Okay, so it's like those substances hijack the brain's reward system, making you crave more and more.
Exactly, you crave that dopamine rush. So researchers are looking at whether GLP-1s can interrupt that cycle.
Fascinating. So did this report find any evidence that GLP-1s actually work for addiction?
This study was huge. They looked at records from 136 health systems across the U.S., over 100 million patients.
Wow, 100 million. That's a massive study. So what did they find?
For people with opioid use disorder who are on GLP-1s, they had a 40% lower chance of overdosing compared to those who weren't taking the meds.
That's significant. What about alcohol?
Similar story there. Those with alcohol use disorder who were prescribed GLP-1s had 50% fewer episodes of alcohol intoxication.
Wow, so these meds could potentially reduce the really harmful behaviors linked with addiction.
That's the idea. It's like they're a protective factor.
Okay, so it seems promising, but how do they actually work in the brain?
We're still figuring that out, but it looks like they might be changing how the reward pathways function, maybe lowering those intense cravings.
So it's not that GLP-1s are blocking the drugs themselves, but changing how the brain reacts to them, making them less appealing.
That's a great way to put it. It's like they're helping the brain rewire itself so it's less vulnerable to the addictive pull.
So this could be a game changer. But we have to be realistic. This is still early research, right?
Absolutely. This was a retrospective study looking back at data that was already there. It gives us clues, but it doesn't prove that GLP-1s directly cause those positive outcomes.
Right. We can't jump to conclusions.
Done.
So more research is definitely needed. What's the next step? What kind of research would give us more solid answers about GLP-1s and addiction?
We need those prospective clinical trials. That means you take a group of people with addiction and randomly give some of them GLP-1s and some a placebo, then track their progress over time.
Okay, so those trials would help determine if GLP-1s actually cause a reduction in substance use, prevent relapses, and overall improve quality of life for people struggling with addiction.
Precisely. And these trials would look at safety and side effects too. Important to know the whole picture.
Right, got to make sure the benefits outweigh any risks. But in the meantime, while we wait for these trials, what else can we do to learn more about GLP-1s and addiction?
Well, alongside the clinical trials, we need more research to really dig into how those GLP-1s mess with the brain's reward system and those addictive behaviors.
So we need to figure out the nitty-gritty of the science behind it all. That deeper understanding could lead to even more targeted and effective treatments in the future.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember, addiction is complex. Medication is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, it's not a magic bullet. A comprehensive approach might involve therapy, support groups, lifestyle changes, and addressing any underlying mental health conditions too.
Absolutely. And access to quality care and support is crucial.
Okay, so bottom line, this research is promising, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Cautious optimism is the way to go.
I agree. We need that solid scientific evidence to guide our next steps.
But it's definitely a glimmer of hope, a whole new avenue to explore for addiction treatment. So let's dig a bit deeper into what this research could mean for people, families, and communities who are dealing with addiction. What kind of impact could this have down the road?
Let's do it.
So let's imagine for a second, right, these GLP-1 meds, they really do work for addiction. What would that look like for people who are struggling, trying to get their lives back on track?
It's like imagine having this new tool, a powerful new weapon in the fight against addiction. It could be a total game changer, especially for folks who haven't had success with other treatments or keep relapsing.
Yeah, that cycle can be so tough to break. And it's not just the individual who benefits, right? Think about the families, the communities.
Yeah.
Everyone's affected by addiction.
Oh, absolutely. Addiction, it ripples outwards.
Yeah.
Families, relationships, workplaces, whole communities, they all bear the burden.
The emotional toll, the financial strain, it's immense.
Exactly. And think about this. If GLP-1s are proven safe and effective, we could see fewer overdoses, fewer hospitalizations, even fewer crimes driven by addiction. That would be huge, right?
Yeah, like a chain reaction of positive change, starting with the individual. But of course, there are always challenges with any new treatment. What are some of the potential hurdles we might face with GLP-1s?
Well, access and affordability are big ones. These meds, they got to be available to everyone who needs them, not just those who can afford them or live in certain areas. We've seen what happens when demand outpaces supply.
Yeah, we don't want a situation where these life-changing treatments become a luxury for the privileged few. We need equal access for everyone.
And we can't forget about stigma, the shame and judgment that still surrounds addiction. We got to break those barriers down so people feel comfortable seeking help.
Right. No more hiding in the shadows, feeling ashamed. Addiction's a disease, not a character flaw. Everyone deserves support, not judgment.
Couldn't agree more. And this research also reminds us that healthcare, it needs to be holistic, right?
Meaning?
Well, this study looked at people with diabetes and obesity, too. Addiction often goes hand in hand with other health issues.
So it's like a reminder that we need to treat the whole person, not just their addiction, but all the other stuff going on, too.
Exactly. We need to look at their physical health, mental health, social factors, the whole picture. It's about creating an environment where people can thrive.
So much to consider. This research, it's exciting, it's promising, but we got to be cautious, too. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. Rigorous science, ethical considerations, access for everyone, it's all got to be part of the conversation.
Well said. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the potential ethical dilemmas surrounding the use of GLP-1s for addiction.
Definitely important to address that. Like with any groundbreaking medical discovery, we need to think about the ethics involved.
So where do we start? What are the big ethical questions surrounding using GLP-1s for addiction?
Well, one of the biggest is access, making sure these meds are available to everyone who needs them, not just based on income or race or where you live. Everyone deserves a shot at recovery, right?
Absolutely. We've seen how healthcare disparities play out, and we don't want to repeat those mistakes with GLP-1s. Everyone should have equal access to these potentially life-changing treatments.
Another concern is, well, the potential for misuse. These GLP-1s, they're already being prescribed for weight loss.
Right. They're all over the news these days.
Exactly. So there's a worry that people might try to use them for non-medical reasons or even try to get them without a prescription.
Yeah, we definitely need to be careful about that. Monitoring how they're prescribed, educating patients, and having safeguards in place to prevent misuse, right?
Exactly. And of course, there's the whole issue of informed consent. Before anyone starts taking these meds, they need to know the potential benefits, but also the risks.
So making sure people understand the possible side effects, how they might interact with other meds, and the fact that we're still learning about them. Is their health their choice?
Spot on. Informed consent is so important. And then there are the bigger picture questions, about how this might change our view of addiction as a whole.
Okay, how so?
Well, if GLP-1s become a standard treatment, will it lead to a more medicalized view of addiction, which could reduce stigma, which is good, but also could we become too reliant on pills as the solution?
That's a really interesting point. It's like we have to balance addressing the biological aspects of addiction, the brain chemistry, with the social, the psychological, the environmental factors that also play a role. It's complex.
It really is. And as with any new technology or treatment, there's always a chance of unintended consequences, things we haven't even thought of yet.
So cautious optimism is key.
Definitely. Excitement about the potential of GLP-1s, but also a careful approach, always considering the ethical side of things.
This deep dive has been so insightful. The potential of GLP-1s, the different types of addiction they might help with, and now these ethical questions we need to grapple with. It's a lot to think about.
It is, but that's how progress happens, right? Asking tough questions, having open discussions, finding that balance between scientific advancement and doing what's right.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to our listeners out there who are battling addiction, please don't lose hope. There are people working hard to find new solutions, new treatments.
Absolutely. There's help available right now. And with research like this, the future's looking brighter. Reach out to your doctor. Find a support group. You're not alone.
Well said. This has been a truly fascinating look at GLP-1s and addiction. We've covered a lot of ground, from the science to the potential benefits and the ethical considerations we can't ignore. It's a complex issue, but one that's definitely worth exploring. So, until next time, keep those questions coming and keep learning. We'll be back with another deep dive soon.